Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Bookstore's virtual event series. My name is Camille Meir, and I'm on the events team at the bookstore. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be welcoming Devi Laskar, Sejal Shah, Anjali Enjeti, Soniah Kamal, and Jenny Bhatt here to this panel on going against the grain in the literary world, where they will be discussing sexism and ageism in the literary community and their experiences as debut authors of South Asian descent. While the pandemic has taken a toll across all of our lives, virtual programs like the one you're about to see have become really big bright spots in all of our days. And I want to give a huge thanks to Devi, Sejal, Anjali, Soniah, and Jenny for joining us this evening. So to housekeeping really quickly, you should be able to hear and see our presenters, but they can't hear or see you. So if you have a question, please click on the Q&A button below in the bottom bar of your screen to submit your question. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can at the end of the program. There's also a chat button down here where I will be posting links to purchase all of tonight's books, so please keep an eye out for those and make sure you click and buy. One caveat for tonight's event, we're all at the mercy of our home internet connections and server loads, so please bear with any technical issues that might arise. We will try to solve them as quickly as possible. We'll be continuing our virtual series across all of the fall, so you should head over to our website and sign up to our newsletter to stay up to date, and I'll also be posting a link to that on the chat. One event that I want to point out that's happened next Tuesday is we'll be pleased to welcome Jessie Kindig to the Zoom stage for a discussion of her new edited volume, The Verso Book of Feminism, and she'll be in conversation with Sarah Leonard and Soraya Chamali. Registrations for that event are live now, so please check it out on our website. So now a little bit about our authors, and then we'll get started. Devi Laskar's first novel is The Atlas of Reds and Blues. She has had work in Tin House, Rattle, and other publications, and she's an alumni of Columbia University's MFA, the VONA Workshop, and the Op-Ed Project. She's also been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, but is a native of Chapel Hill in North Carolina. Sejal Shah is the author of the debut essay collection, This Is One Way to Dance. She received a 2018 New York Foundation of the Arts Fellowship in Fiction, and she teaches at the Rayner Writing Workshop at Pacific Lutheran University. She lives in Rochester, New York. Anjali Enjeti is a former attorney whose collection of essays about identity and social change is forthcoming from the University of Georgia Press, and her debut novel is forthcoming from Hub City Press. She teaches creative nonfiction in the MFA program at Reinhardt University and lives outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Soniah Kamal's novel, Unmarriageable, Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan, has been featured on PBS Books and has received numerous accolades, including being the Financial Times Reader's Best Book of 2019 and an NPR Code Switch and New York Public Library's 2019 Summer Read Pick, among many others. Kamal is a nominee for the 2020 Georgia Author of the Year and has been shortlisted for a Townsend Award for Fiction, and her forthcoming novel, An Isolated Incident, which is forthcoming in the UK, is also a finalist for the Townsend Award and other prizes. And Soniah is based in Georgia. And Jenny Bhatt is a writer, literary translator, and literary critic. She is the host of the Desi Books podcast. Her debut story collection, Each of Us Killers, was listed as a most anticipated book of 2020 by Electric Literature, The Millions, and LitHub. Her literary translation of Gujarati short story pioneer Dhumetgu's best short fiction will be out later this year. And she was a finalist for the 2017 Best of the Net anthology and is currently based in Dallas, Texas. Panelists, the stage is now yours. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I just started off and then we'll get into the questions. I want to first start off with just giving a little bit of credit to somebody whom I stole the idea for this panel from. She's on with us, Anjali, because there was an AWP panel that was going to happen this year, which was about ageism. And I thought, what a great topic. And then I thought, well, but you know, it's not the same for everyone. Ageism in publishing, it varies. And women of color, especially like us, and we've all had conversations on social media individually or as groups about this. So I'm just going to give you credit for that, Anjali, because I stole that idea from you. So
you wrote that tweet, so I kind of got the idea from you. So it's
yeah. So yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I'll start off with the first question, if that's okay, and then everyone can answer, and then we'll just have other folks, the rest of you ask questions. And I think, since you mentioned the origin about the tweet, and yes, I know the one you're talking about, it was in 2017, I believe, or 18, right? When, one of these best under 35 or best under 40 lists had come out. And I just randomly tweeted, I was actually sitting in India at the time, by the way. So it was my nighttime, it was morning here in the US. And I just tweeted, I wish there was, there were lists for over 45s or something. And that suddenly went viral and a whole bunch of people responded. And then Sari Botton, God bless her, said, hey, can you write an essay about it? And so then it went from there, and then Literary Hub wanted a reading list. So my question to all of you is, because for me, the whole ageism thing really hit home when I started paying more attention to those lists. I mean, it's not that it wasn't happening around me to other writers I knew, but it really started to hit home with those lists, So for me, that was when it just kind of locked into my head, and I said I started thinking about it more. So my question to all of you is, when was the first time you felt or you knew that, okay, this is an issue and it bothers me, right?
For me, Jenny, if I'll take it first real quick, is I saw those lists fairly early for some reason, because they'd even before internet, they'd always be some list or the other. And also, I have to say, when I first started writing 25 years ago, and you start querying agents, I think for me, the first clue was that I was actually asked, well, how old are you? And not just how old are you, but can you send a picture? And then I had a few agents literally saying that, well, you know what, Will, and maybe this was what happened back then, because I haven't heard things like this for the longest time, that, oh, well, we'll put a picture in with the submission and whatnot. Maybe this shows the caliber of the agents, I'm not sure. But, back in the day, even 10, 15 years ago, there was a photographer, Marian, I think Ettlinger, but everyone wanted to be, the author photographed by her and stuff. But I have to say, given Pakistani culture and given that I'm from Pakistan, I was a little used to that, because really the same ageism pops up in marriage stuff also. And I was considered over the hill at 24. And my sister actually got married before me. So I had a lot of practice with being told that I'm, over the hill and nothing's going to come out of this, and you'll never do this and you'll never do that. So in a way, when I started hearing the age stuff and seeing the lists, I had a little bit of practice with that, and I started paralleling it with that too, which was actually very encouraging, because I did end up getting married, and it wasn't the end of the road. So I kept thinking maybe they know some things, but they don't know everything, and that it's never the end of the road. And really, the wonderful thing with writing, I feel, and one reason I got into writing also, or stuck with it, is that it's not age dependent. It was never age dependent. There's so much to be said for experience and what you can write with experience, and from experience. And I always, whenever I heard a discouraging remark about, my 35th birthday would go, my 40th birthday would go, and I'd look at these lists in all these places, and I'd say, it's okay, it doesn't matter. I'm accruing experience, and that's bigger than a list. And that would be very encouraging to me, myself.
So in my case, I would say many, many years ago, I was born and raised in the US, but Jhumpa Lahiri, got Interpreter of Maladies, and she was young and so pretty, and I was cheering her on, like, so exciting to see someone like her. But she actually, I think, with her success, she shut the door for everyone, because everyone suddenly was like, oh, well, there's your one representative author. She's young, she's cute. You're done. See you in 5 to 10 years. And, and I remember I was in my 30s when her book came out. I was a new mom, so I was pretty haggard. And I was like, well, ask for my picture. But I was pretty upset at the idea that there was just going to be one person who was going to represent everyone. I didn't really care for that. And I've really worked hard over the years, wherever I've gone, in terms of like classes or, conferences to build community. Because I feel like, especially now with social media on our side, we have a chance to help each other and to build up a community and to have diverse voices, which can only help, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I came to writing later in life, possibly later than everyone on the panel. I don't know. I didn't start writing seriously until my late 20s, but I didn't actually start submitting work until I was 33, I think, which now was quite a while ago. So I didn't know many other writers. And so one of the first things I did was I started really reading more carefully author profiles in like the New York Times. And I subscribed to Writer's Digest and Poets and Writers. And when I started getting those magazines and opening them up, I noticed how young people were. I noticed how young they were when they were profiled in the Washington Post and in the New Yorker. And the big debut, this is the big, phenom of this year is this author who's 28 or 26. And so there I was at age 33, age 34, thinking, wow, I've already missed the boat on this. And, years from my first book coming out, which is still not even coming out until next year, but it was seeing in writing spaces, in magazines, seeing who speakers were at writing events, right? At conferences or at readings, just seeing so much youth. And then of course, you're not supposed to admit how old you are. So sometimes I would see writers and think, gosh, they look so young, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe they were actually in their early 40s and I didn't know, because you have to keep that a secret. But it was really when I started looking for my first agent in my early 30s, when I just felt like, wow, it's already over for me and it hasn't even started yet.
I was thinking about those anthologies, right? Like 25 under 35 and 25 under 30. I remember always, finding those and reading those. But I had been writing and publishing. I started as a poet and had been, publishing in literary magazines, and then did an MFA in fiction. And I was in my 20s when Interpreter of Maladies came out, and we had that whole like, okay, it's over now, right? There's just room for one. And actually, Kamala Shamsi graduated from my MFA program. We only overlapped for a year, but I had this is something that I wrote in an essay from 20 years ago. This is what they all say: you'll publish first. Hey, Arundhati Roy. Hey, Jhumpa Lahiri. Where's your bestseller? As I started, graduate school in 1997. So they're just, it was like Indian fiction has arrived, right, in the New Yorker. And then I remember being in my later 20s thinking, I've missed it, right? And you keep going. I think it's funny, Sonia, what you were saying about with marriage. I remember telling some family friends, or just introducing them to my my now husband, and their kids got married in their 20s, and they were so surprised. I mean, they just said, well, better late than never. And I remember thinking, no, actually, I mean, it's not better late than never. Better never than marry the wrong person, I would think, right?
But that said, I'm just going to quickly say that with marriage, yes, better to never get married, to enjoy life by your own, and you can do that. You don't have to get married to do that until you find the right person. But it's not necessarily the equivalent of a book house. I used to, for the longest time, sort of like a lot of people think of, think of publishing analogous to motherhood or, childbirth or that sort of thing. And I have to say, I had a very horrendous miscarriage, and never again would I equate the two, or will I equate the two. It's not the same. But with marriage, with the marriage analogy, never get married. You can be fine and happy and everything. And I wonder though that if you never do put a book out, because the contract is, yes, you write a book, but with diary entries and stuff, it's what you're writing for yourself. You stick it in the drawer, you you probably don't want anyone to see those anyway. But when you're writing something, a short story, a novel, a memoir or whatever, the contract is that you do want it to be out there. You do want readers to read it. That's that seems to be the final act of the words that you've written. And I have to say, I was probably very naive, because when I saw, Jhumpa Lahiri, and I remember when I came to college out in the US in the early 90s, and there really was nothing on the shelf. The first book, that Desi book that I saw by a Desi author that I saw on the shelf, I mean, there were the R.K. Narayans and the Nepals and stuff, but more contemporary was actually Chitra Devakaruni's short story, Arranged Marriage. And a little after that, Manil Suri's Death of Vishnu came. And I thought the gates had opened. I was so naive and so green, and it's been a learning curve. But I really thought, oh my God, gates open. And yeah, it seemed to be that the gates had opened and then closed very fast. And I think for most of us here, learning what that meant in terms of publishing has been its own journey in many respects, So
I also think, one of my teachers in graduate school, she was a poet, and she said something really wise that I've just carried with me forever and ever. And she looked around the room and she said, all of you, if you persist, you will be published. Perhaps not in the genre, that you're intending, but definitely you'll get something out there. It's just a matter of time. But when you're in your late 20s or early 30s and someone's telling you have to wait for a really long time, and it might not even be in the genre that you're studying your butt off in, that's hard to hear. But it ended up being very true. Like, amongst my peer set, we were all in a poetry class with her, and I did start off as a poet, but things change, and people have moved on to different genres. So that's something to think about too, that writing is writing, and we should sort of carry forward the idea that to be persistent and not to let people persuade you to stop. Right.
I think also just this whole, like, what's under your control and what isn't, right? It's under your control to write. It's under your control to send things out. And then what happens is not, is not often under our control.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So who wants to take the next question? Someone want to go with a question?
Well, I just want to throw out one out there, sort of on the heels of what Sonia said a few minutes ago. What do you think the strategy should be for those of us, we're in pretty rarefied air in the sense that we all have something now and or about to, and publishing still 86% white and predominantly male, and what should we be doing for each other?
I think the first thing is what you've pointed out, and I think what all of us feel is the community aspect. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. When I found out that my first two books are all, both of them are coming out this year. Initially, it was the election year, then it was the pandemic, and all of this. And I thought, okay, this is the card I've been dealt, and how can I make the most of it? And I don't have the MFA or the background. I mean, like Anjali, I didn't even start submitting to literary magazines till I was 45, to be honest, because that's when I left my corporate career and I was able to write. So I was off the literary grid, right? I had social media. I was sitting in India, and I had the time zone issue. But the thing that I think the community aspect that you've mentioned, that has been my biggest thing, is to, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so I feel like, let's just keep the tide rising. Let's all get together like we're doing at these virtual events, because we can't meet in person. So let's do it this way, right? So the more we talk about these things, the more we normalize conversations around these topics, especially I think in the South Asian communities, because, you know, as Sonia has said, you've got Pakistani culture. We've got that, as Sejal said, in the Indian origin culture. We've got these taboos where we don't talk about these types of things. And we have to have these respectable jobs, which in my case was, you're either going to be a doctor or an engineer. And, you know, if you plan to be single and work, otherwise you marry, you know, and you marry well, and that's about it. So to go against all of that, and to say, I mean, I got married at 48, so there we are, you know. So, but yeah, I think community for me is the biggest thing.
So for me, so I basically started an entire new career because I was being rejected for so many years. I'm a journalist because I couldn't sell my fiction. That's basically how this career came to me. I was 10 years, I had submitted multiple books for 10 years, submitted, not even writing. The writing was even longer than that. But I had submitted multiple books for 10 years. One of them was an anthology with Sonia, which I still can't believe didn't sell. But I had submitted multiple books, fiction and nonfiction, for 10 years. And then after I got to that point, and I had been doing a lot of freelance writing up until then, but I got to that point and I was like, you know, I've got to stop making getting a book published a life goal. I had put so much energy and so much importance in trying to be accepted by this publishing industry, which was clearly not accepting me. I had a couple of agents where I had, especially with one, a very negative experience. I had other agents leading me on for so long. I couldn't get anywhere. And then in the middle of submitting, a lot of small presses that used to take unagented work suddenly started taking only agented work again. So then it felt like the pool of where to even submit my books was shrinking every single day. So I finally decided, a decade into submitting multiple books, that this was just not going to be my life anymore. It was not going to be my goal. And so instead of querying between 3 to 5 times a week for years, and submitting in like submittable for open reading periods for smaller presses, I basically hardly sent out my stuff anymore. I might submit something once a month to an agent or an editor. And that's what I did. And I threw myself into this other career, which I find very rewarding, as well as teaching. I teach as well. But I decided that I needed to get some work out that I believed in into the world. And if I was going to die without publishing a book, I just didn't care anymore. And that's when things started happening to me, when I hardly started submitting and I decided I am not getting through to this publishing industry for whatever reason. I'm not a part of it and I can't get in, so I'm going to stop. And I hardly submitted anymore, and that's when these 2 book contracts came. But I will say that I'm glad I did, because I had so little angst anymore and so little feeling defeated and like I wasn't part of this, you know, elite publishing group of authors who had books out. I just started shedding all of that. And I was a happier writer. I was just happy then writing my books, not knowing whether they'd see the light of day. And it was great for me to do that psychologically.
You know, what you just said right there, which is basically how I'd hit that point in 2018 after 3 bad experiences with bad publishers, and I'd withdrawn my book. And I just thought, I've got no more fucks left to give. I'm sorry for swearing, but that's it. I was like, okay, I'm going to do my book reviews and I'm going to do my translation work and forget the book, you know, not worth it. And so, yeah, and then that's when things, you know, suddenly happened, because I wasn't even reaching out to people. I wasn't sending emails.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think at some point, everyone feels that way, especially those who've been submitting for a very long time and writing for a very long time, because really the wall of rejections, writing is one of the weirdest careers, and perhaps acting is the equivalent. But when you get a rejection which says, oh, this was great, I loved it, but it's not right for us. I loved it, but it's not right for us. This was great, but it's not right for us. And then you share the good news of being rejected, but with all these things, you know, which other place does that? So it's this balancing act also, because with writing, I felt that things can change so fast. You know, the first thing when you're a first-time writer, beginning writer and stuff, the first big hurdle is the agent. Will I get an agent? You know, will an agent be interested? And I have to say, I've had 7 agents at this point, and agents are, yes, it's its own heart. You know, I slowly learned that it's its own heartbreak in so many different ways, because it's you first write your stuff, then you get the agents, then you have to wait for the editors, then the reviews, and community is so important. But the fact of the matter is that there's sometimes things that come up with community also, and you have to learn who is your community and who is not your community also. You know, I have to say, I did for the longest time with my literary journalism, I did book reviews, author interviews, everything, and you quickly learn, you know, what community really means and who is to, you know, all sorts of things. So there's so many different facets to it. But you know, I have so many, I teach also, and there's so many young authors who come to me, especially from Pakistan or otherwise Indian and stuff, and they're really under the impression that once you get an agent, that's it. Every door is open and every problem is over. And I hate to disappoint people, but I will always be honest with everyone that sometimes your problems can begin there too, because your agent can be as helpless as you. They can send things out, and the editors, you know, and we can talk a little bit about what Desi writers or writers of color face when it comes to submissions and things, because it's not the same for everyone at all. And you know, just because, like we said in the beginning, I think you know, many of you mentioned Jhumpa, and what might have been a door opening, many of us found was not necessarily that door opening, and that's a very different trajectory for us than from a lot of further writers per se, who we might look at. And you know, so what does it mean to be a Desi, a South Asian writer who's hitting 50, 55, 60 versus someone from some other group of writers, you know?
To me, it's so, I don't know, it's so inspiring to be in this virtual space with all of you, to say that there is room for multiple stories, that there are many stories out there and that we need them.
Yes.
I think one thing, you know, if someone had told me that I would not publish my first book till my 40s, I don't know what I would have thought in my 20s or 30s. I think I would have been horrified or mortified, or I like, to me, you know, over 40 just seemed like so old. But I'm just thinking of who I was then. But I actually feel like, you know, even though it's been a challenging year for all these reasons, that actually having been active as a writer and having writer friends and being part of a community and supporting others, that I feel like people really came out to support my book in ways that I wouldn't have guessed. And I think partly it's from, you know, having been part of a community and writing for a long time. I don't know what it would be like to have, like, you know, done this at 26 or 36. I feel the time right now in a good way.
Yeah, I think, just quickly to interject, I will say that I felt for the longest time that I was writing with everyone else where there was a mentality of scarcity. And not that we necessarily gave birth to this mentality of scarcity, but it was the constant rejections that we felt. And then we felt there was this one superstar who'd be born every decade. And that meant the door closed for us, because sometimes literally it was the door closed for us. I think with, you know, diverse voices and own voices and everything, and also in the last 5-7 years, what I've noticed is so many smaller presses coming. You know, it used to be that if you were with a smaller press, I couldn't get, I would pitch interviews and reviews to publications, and if it was a small press, they weren't interested. And that's completely changed now, I feel, you know, especially maybe with prizes. I don't know what the exact, you know, what all the reasons are, but I see a sea change in that. And because of that, I feel that we also have a lot more doors and avenues open to us. So that scarcity of, you know, mentality of scarcity, which used to be perhaps the case through no fault of our own, now that that's gone, and now that so many of us are connecting over line and building this community, and thank you to, you know, but you know, and I think that change is so positive and so wonderful, and it will continue.
Anjali, you had a very interesting question when we were trading emails. Do you want to get into that maybe a little?
Oh, I think I asked how sort of our identities, plural, especially those that are marginalized, influence our experiences with the publishing industry. So not just being over 40, but also the fact that we are brown people, that we are women, others of us have disabilities or queer identities. So how does that impact the ageism prong? I mean, I don't want to lead an answer here, but I do think that our experiences are different than white men over the age of 40, who, by the way, love to tell me that they actually think they have it the hardest in the publishing industry. So I want to know how you all think that your sort of multiply marginalized identities affect the ageism that you experience.
I mean, I think, you know, it kind of goes back to what we were saying before, you know, when you're young, then you can pretty much, or considered young or considered the new thing, right? Then whatever else you are kind of recedes, and, oh, well, this is, you know, we live in a culture that celebrates youth, right? And so, you know, I was 52 when my novel came out, and and so, you know, I had this, and I had tried for years to get, you know, to get it published and to get other things published, and nothing was working. So I decided that my attitude should just be, well, you know, I can't be alone here. There's got to be others, and we have to just band together, whatever that means, because we have strength in numbers, right? We have strength in our, you know, in our desire to see more inclusiveness. I want to change the conversation from the old white men who, you know, who we are taught in school and who we are told to emulate. And even though that, you know, often, at least it's been my experience, you know, when I'm reading something that was written 200 years ago by, you know, like an Irish poet, you know, it does not resonate with me necessarily. And I'm told that this is the standard, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, I strongly believe, you know, all of us come from a very rich and varied culture, and why shouldn't we be, you know, why shouldn't we be infusing our modern experiences with what we know to be very good and worth sharing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that just a few months ago, there's a short story of mine which is told from the point of view of an elderly Pakistani couple who immigrate when they're very old, mm-hmm. and they have a white daughter-in-law. And even in 2020, the feedback was, well, can you tell the story from the daughter-in-law's point of view? And you don't know what, at this point, I don't even say anything. I mean, what is there to say? That no, I can't, except for no, I can't. And that is a sea change also. The fact that I will say, no, I can't, and I don't want to, and I'm not going to, you know. This is a story which I think these are stories which everyone wants to read, not just those from our community. And I think you're doing a disservice by saying, can you write it in so-and-so point of view? Because I think people are more willing to, and have perhaps always been, but perhaps never given the choice. Because when they see only what is published on the shelf, they don't even know they have a choice of anything else. You know?
Right.
Well,
right.
And to your point, I think, you know, even when there's discussions about ageism, whether it's in publishing or any other industry, you know, it tends to center white ageism, I think, as Anjali has pointed out before. I just read a beautiful profile about Isabella Rossellini this morning at The Guardian. Beautiful. I even retweeted it, you know, and it was so well written. And I thought, why is it that when they're talking about women coming into their power with age and all these wonderful things, it's always a white woman? You know, I want to read about us, people like me, coming into our power, you know, and we are, all of us are, but we don't get to tell those stories. or we don't get to get those stories published out there like you did with this older couple. So I feel like that, and then I think to Anjali's point, we have all the other intersecting forces coming in, whether it's, the queer identity, it's the disability. And I think, Sejal, you've written about this and you've talked a lot about this in your interviews as well, right? About how there are different aspects of our identities, and, it makes things more complex. And maybe, I don't know, maybe the gatekeepers in publishing, maybe it's hard for them to get their heads around it. I don't know. What has been your experience?
I was just looking at, I recently read 12 Short Tales of Women at Work, right? And I so appreciated that, right? Like, what is it to be a young woman of color? What is it, what is that experience like? That's sexism and racism together, right? It's intersectional. It's, we never get to decide to take one part of our, identity out. Like, I'm not going to deal with the Indian thing today, or, I mean, to me, I found that my fiction was often read as being autobiographical, as nonfiction, and in some ways, I think that almost pushed me into writing more nonfiction. And so I'm really happy to see that there's room. It seems like there's more room now for fiction. That yes, we can imagine characters, we can draw from parts of our lives. We can have a character who's Gujarati and living in Rochester, and it doesn't mean that it's Sejal Shah, right?
Yeah. I was really surprised. I will say I was surprised when Unmarriageable sold, because it didn't have the three tropes that I tend to see that I had, and my own first novel, An Isolated Incident, had, but I call them, the immigrant fiction, which is the woe is me woman, I've come from wherever I've come from and now I've been saved over here. And then as a Pakistani, it was terrorism, there had to be some terrorism stuff, because if you're coming from a certain background, a certain religious background stuff, it had to be about that. And then the third one is, I forget what it is right now, but there were these three tropes.
Wedding.
The weddings. Oh, no, everyone, the weddings are, across the board. But it was and Unmarriageable had none of them. It there was no terrorism. There was no. It's not an immigrant tale. It's not, and it's not. Oh, the third one actually, it was the immigrant tale and then the woe woman. And it's not that. It's not an immigrant tale. No one comes to the. I mean, it's completely set in Pakistan. I really, really thought I wrote it the way it was written. I never meant to write it. It just happened. So then, and suddenly I was told to send it to my agent, sent it, and I never thought it would be picked up because it was none of this. And my first novel, on the other hand, An Isolated Incident, which is in the UK, but which has all these three tropes, is having a hard time getting published over here. And I've been told it's a good book. So, the UK publishers asked for it themselves. We didn't pitch it to them. So for me, I've been on this very strange crossroads of what it is publishers, gatekeepers and stuff are looking for and not. Because the novel that one would think would be a shoo-in is still looking for a home, and the one that I thought, because it didn't have the usual stuff in it, would be very hard to publish, got picked up in a heartbeat. So I share this to say that I think there is room for stories which aren't the norm that we've seen, and that more and more, there's so many I think Desi writers or writers from South Asian background who have set their stories as about kids and on the borders and illegal crossings and stuff like, so there's room for a lot more stories, and I do see those being published. I think Shanti Sekaran published, does anyone remember the name of her?
Lucky Boy.
And that was so different. It was really wonderful. Different. It was about, it was set in, I'm forgetting now, but I do remember that it was very different from the norm also. So I do think there is room for that. More and more publishers and gatekeepers are, and what I wanted to say is that from my experience these days, it doesn't even seem to me to be the editors who are doing the choosing. It's all marketing. I keep being, the books seem to go to marketing, and it's marketing who are, I know editors who have loved books and wanted to publish them, but then but then it basically marketing says no, and they're helpless too. So I do want to speak on behalf of the editors who do want to publish new stuff, but they're up against the marketing. And I think a big conversation is, what do we do about this marketing gatekeeping that so many of us tend to face?
Yeah, my book incorporates racism and misogyny and police violence. So I wasn't sure who was going to be picking that puppy up, nor publishing it, nor reading it, frankly. Just, and I agree with Sonia. Like, you just don't know what you're going to get. However, I think the one thing that I have noticed that I take a lot of pleasure from is that, for example, several years ago, I noticed that when one of us published a book, generally there was a glossary in the back and the words were italicized and it was ridiculous. And one of the things that, I was a member of VONA for a while, and one of the things my teacher was like, look, you can't change the world overnight, but you can change one thing. And if you can convince just your publisher, whenever that will be, to not italicize the words and to skip the glossary, then all the books that come after you can use your book as the
Georgia
example.
did it. Yeah.
Right. And it was great because that was the one thing I was able to do. Like I had a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation ready for my editor at Counterpoint, and I went in going, all right, I'm going to say the following 8 things and I'm going to make my case. And she cut me off within like a minute. And she's like, you wrote a book about being other. Of course, I'm not going to italicize your words. And I literally, like, my jaw dropped and I'm like, but I have a 45-minute presentation. But it made me feel great because then there were a couple books last year and that I was directly, like, I came to know the author, and they were women of color, and they were like, when your book came out, I was able to take it to my editor and say, look, no italics, no glossary, and they agreed with me. And so we were able to do one thing. And I think it's up to us to sort of, as we are getting our successes, to think about the people who are coming after us and see what we can do for them.
I love what you said there, which is fight for one thing, one change. Yeah. I was lucky. I was ready to fight for that one thing that I didn't end up having to fight for because my publisher and my editor are just the best. But I was ready I wanted brown faces on the cover, and I was ready to fight for that. I walked away from one publisher because they wouldn't allow that. So I will tell you, I mean, see, when you've reached a certain age, and when, as Anjali said, publishing a book isn't the be all and end all, I was like, I don't care if you don't publish me. I'm walking away. You're not doing this. I will make money elsewhere because I had another job. I mean, I'm not going to, but to your point, I love that. And I think if every one of us, people who are on listening and, about to publish a book or hoping to publish a book, I would take that advice to heart. If I was listening in the audience right now, what Devi just said, I would be writing it down or tattooing it somewhere, which is fight for one thing, just one thing. Get one change in the industry. Because if each one of us does that, imagine what we can get,
Yeah, I think for me, the one that I was, there for Penguin Random House, I think they had a certain house style, which, you just can't argue with and you can't budge when it comes to italics and stuff. But for me, I was really, Unmarriageable is so much, it's a retelling, it's post-colonial retelling. So for me, the post-colonial bit was very, very important. This was a orientation of British Empire for me, So I was actually a little scared that I was going to be told to make, because there's marriages in it too. So I was really scared that I was going to sort of be told to do the whole marriage stuff more and the post, and I was so pleasantly surprised. Not even, I have to say, my editor, not even once did she say, add more mango here, or add this here, or add this there. It was a wonderful surprise. And it was just, and the thing is, it's very freeing when you don't have to argue about these things and you don't feel boxed in by what you're supposed to present or how you're supposed to present your culture. I felt what that did give me was the freedom to really the freedom to breathe on the page and tell the story the way I wanted to tell it, rather than, you know, rather than what might sell according to what some publisher might want. So,
Well,
and you know, so yeah, there are battles that yes, definitely pick your battles, pick one, but there are some, I have to say, because there are italics in my novel, and I did argue for there to not be, but apparently with some houses, if it's a house style, I will say what I would have walked away from, and this is something for me, if a glossary, I would not have wanted a glossary. I feel in the age of the internet, when people can just Google things, there's just no need for a glossary. People will look up what they want to see. And with Kindle and other e-readers, you can just tap and things will come up. So that seemed very archaic to me.
We were just talking about selling books. I just want to remind everyone that these events are really wonderful. They take a lot of work to put on. Actually, they're free, but they're not free for the bookstore. So please do, by the way, you've got all of our books that are in the chat, any other books that you need to buy, right? Presents coming up. This is the time. Please support our community bookstore and your independent bookstores.
I have a quick question for Anjali and Sejal, because you write nonfiction. What has been your experience in terms of your nonfiction getting out there, and when you pitch, and are editors sort of steering you in a particular direction, or have they been more open to your new ideas?
Anjali, you want to take that?
Maybe just so I understand, are you talking about with respect to like book writing nonfiction, or just sort of like essays and other things that are?
Well, I mean, I think one leads to the other, right? Yeah. So, you know, but yeah, in general, the experience of pitching something, whether it is book length or shorter, and the topics that you're interested in versus what you're able to get published one way or the other.
So, you know, in the university press situation is I think very different than a lot of presses. You know, you have these readers who sort of give you these long editorial letters with feedback, and then you can accept some things or turn them down. And my book is a collection of essays that are kind of blend personal and critical. There's a lot of reporting in them, a lot of criticism in them. They're not really straight personal essays. And then I have like a few essays that are told really weirdly. Like I have one very long essay that's told in a list, and you know, a poem, and then I have a media criticism essay that's really long, but that has like personal pieces sort of woven within it of my experience of understanding what the media is and what it does. So there are some essays I've written that I've actually not seen myself published in magazines or newspapers before. So I really didn't know what UGA Press was going to think about it. And I was a little worried when I got my editorial letters back from my readers that structure was going to be something that people were concerned with. And actually, that wasn't a problem. I mean, especially with my one really unusual essay, nobody had an issue with it. I don't, you know, I think, you know, it's just a matter of so many people coming before me and getting these types of more unusually told pieces of nonfiction. And they really broke the barriers down, because by the time I came through, I mean, we talked about italics. I didn't have to say anything about italics to my presses. Hub City just, that the piece came to them as it came to them with no italics, and they didn't even say anything. But I think, you know, one of the things I tell my nonfiction students is that, you know, two of you here are poets, is that I feel like it's never been a more exciting time to write nonfiction, because I see such unusual nonfiction everywhere. You know, really non-traditional forms and structures, and you know, and we've got graphic memoirs now that are so huge. I mean, they've been around for a really long time. I was reading them ages ago, but you didn't hear a whole lot about them. They didn't get a ton of publicity, right? So I mean, I think editors are much more open-minded to any kind of nonfiction nowadays. And the weird little essays that kind of blend a whole bunch of genres in one, people seem to be receptive to them. At least that's my experience.
That was mine too. I mean, I had, I think my book was a finalist in 6 contests, and some were fiction and some were, I had a hybrid manuscript. And then Valerie Boyd, one of the series editors at Georgia for the Crux series, asked me to submit. So that then I took the essays that I wanted, and I'd written some others, and I have 5 of the, I think there are 23 or 25 pieces in my book. 5 used to be short stories.
Wow.
2 could be thought of as poems. So I do think that, in that, and as I wrote in my introduction, I felt like essays and nonfiction gave me the most range and space. And the other thing is that I think, like, if you're writing a blog or a newsletter, I did blog for the Kenyon Review for 6 months, and I think that helped to kind of figure out what my voice was. Mm-hmm. Even though, I mean, there are only a few of those essays that made it into the book, but I think that was helpful for me because I didn't have a regular, otherwise it would be like when I wrote something or when I pitched something, and when I, but to have the deadline for me was to see, like, okay, if given my druthers and I could write about anything, what would I write about?
Right. I think many of us have been reporters at one time, and long live the deadline, So.
I know. Yeah, we only have a few minutes, right? And we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone. I just wanted to come in and kick off the audience Q&A. We do have a few questions that I think would be great for y'all to answer. So the first one I'll ask is, now that we're in quarantine, one of our attendees wants to know what your writing lives are like right now. Are you finding yourselves writing more, less? What are the unique stressors or the unique advantages you're finding?
I think for me personally, only deadlines are working at this time. I don't seem to be able to generate anything of my own per se, but with the personal essays that I do write, whether they're for COVID anthologies that I had to write one for, or just stuff, I write a lot about memory and nostalgia and what that means and stuff. So I get solicited for those. And really, I sometimes find myself writing 2 days before, or even with some of the conferences where I've had to speak, I'll just scramble because there's a deadline, and that's the only thing that seems to be working for some bizarre reason. Bizarre, but yeah, nothing else does. Nothing else is working for me, unfortunately.
In my case, I have kept my expectations low. Because it's COVID, I am requiring myself to just write 1 sentence a day. And I'm actually getting a lot done because my expectations are so low that once I meet it, of course, I think I write more than a sentence a day. But because I'm not holding myself to that really strict, unattainable goal of writing a lot, I am actually able to get things done because I am just not crossing a very high bar every day.
And I think with me, I just had obviously my book just came out last month, so I've been doing more of the whole promo cycle with essays and interviews. So I think it's safe to say, like Sonia, I've been deadline driven because those are deadlines. And so I've been getting a lot of writing done, but it's because of the book. And I'd like to get back to just writing for the sake of writing at some point.
Maybe I'm going to use your idea with the 1 sentence a day. Maybe that's something that I need to implement. If I showed you my desktop, you would see that I have started numerous short stories and essays that are like, don't go beyond, 2/3 of a page. And I have great ideas, I promise you. But for some reason, I can't actually implement them. I just can't get very far in anything. So creatively speaking, I'm not writing, but I also think that has to do with the fact that I'm not really reading a whole lot right now. I don't have the attention span for that either. So really hoping to get some of that back.
What about you, Sejal?
I just forgot what the question is. Sorry. About how,
are you managing to get anything written these days?
I still have some book promo things that are, so it's mostly by deadline. But yeah, that one sentence sounds very helpful. And I think as much as I can, like, I'm trying to read more. I just feel like I have to fill the well.
Yeah, I feel like my well is drying up every day. I am just trying so hard to read, even if it's a newspaper article or a magazine piece, but just trying to just get as many words in, because it's all like a sieve. It's all just
I think for me, reading has turned out to be, very important at this time, just because, I mean, I love reading, obviously, who doesn't? All of us do, etc. But I'm really able to escape into the books, and it helps me shut all the outside noise and all the stuff that we're going through and everything. But by dint of that, though, I will say I'm a huge streaming device watcher. I love my Netflix. I love my Amazon. It sucks up a lot of time. But I will say again, we're storytellers, and the storytellers that we're seeing, storytelling we're seeing on screen is phenomenal, I feel. So at least that's what I tell myself, that it might not be on the page, but it's storytelling.
Oh, yeah. There was a question about like what? Yes. So World of Wonders is on my list, and I'm reading Like Love, Michelle Morano's new essay collection.
There's the question, like, what is everyone reading? What is everyone watching that's inspiring them to segue?
So I'm a little late to this, but I am actually just starting this. So I loved Underground Railroad, and and I finally finished. I don't know why I had started the book, but then something came up. But I finally finished Euphoria by Lily King. It's basically a fictionalized tale of Margaret Mead, and it's fantastic. And so that was really fun. And I really escaped for a long time into the jungle, and it was lovely. So.
I'm looking forward to reading Meena Kandasamy novel, Exquisite Cadavers. That's coming out November. Ooh. And so I'm looking forward to reading that. She's done some interesting things with structure. So I just got that one. And I finished reading or rereading Toni Morrison's Jazz, because I was teaching it for a workshop. And so those are my two books right now. So
A Suitable Boy is about to come out in the US by Vikram Seth, the BBC drama. And it was a seminal text for me when it came out, and still is. So I have to say, and it's 1,000+ words, pages. So I'm rereading that, and I've been asked to do an essay on that. So but I'm loving it on the thing. So I wanted to read the book and that, and just whatever I can get. Lots of stuff on the internet that's so wonderful. Also, I have to say that my attention span really stays with the stories and the essays and the stuff that all of you write. You've written such wonderful essays, all of you, and even just stuff like that. And just reading the bigger pieces, the smaller pieces, everything is just grist for the mill.
I want to recommend this to our audience: Before and After the Book Deal, a writer's guide to finishing, publishing, promoting, and surviving your first book. I wish it came out this year, and I could have used it years ago. I think it's really helpful if you're thinking about it, because we you can't control some of this, but it's just got some good advice. So I hate when you have to reinvent the wheel, right?
And then this just came out this week. It's called A Measure of Belonging. I am one of 21 authors, and including Sonia, and who have some relationship to the South. And so this was really fun.
I will say that it's short. The essays are lovely, and you really can read it. It's this. I would wholeheartedly recommend it. They're so, all the essays are different, but collectively they really do put a different picture of the South. That all the ones when I read it, I felt that way. But yeah, it's a lovely collection.
I wanted to recommend Zadie Smith's new book. It's a thin essay collection. I think it's called Intimations. Is that
Intimations?
Right? It's wonderful. It's short. It's about this time, basically. And so I've really enjoyed that. And I'm reading Jenny O'Fill's Weather. I hadn't read that when it first came out, which I love her writing. I just got Claudia Rankine's new book, so it was back ordered for a while. So I'm looking forward to it.
I haven't gotten that yet. But thanks for the reminder. I don't have
Well, we're almost at time, but I want to just do this one last question because I think it's a really worthwhile one, and a couple people in the chat have kind of asked around it or asked it. What are all of your experiences with writing communities, and do you have any recommendations for, you know, communities that people could, if they're of color, if they're they see that they could join that you think would be supportive for their work? Similar to Vona or, you know, other groups like that.
I love Vona. You know, I feel like it's a really different experience to be in a conference where everyone is a person of color and you are not operating in any way under any kind of dominant white gaze. Another workshop that I really like, it's called Under the Volcano. It's run by one of my former teachers, and it's in Mexico. And so there is a lot of chance to meet, to build a community with people whose relationship to English it's not their first language. So it's really lovely to.
I would add Kundiman to that. I became a fellow after I had my MFA, after I'd been a professor, after I left academia. So, and I came back around, but just to be someplace where it wasn't the white gaze was transformative. And of course, they're modeled after Cave Canem.
And can I say for people who are on and who don't have MFAs maybe, or who don't have access to such organized communities, which are great. I mean, I would love to have gone to some of those, but I would say if you are not able to get to some of those kinds of communities, build your own. Start where you are. You can do it. You just need to get a few writer friends together. You can start doing, you know, Zoom events if you want on Friday nights and, you know, bring your own booze kind of thing. Or you can join events like this, but build your own. There can never be enough of that. So that's all I would say.
Yeah.
And social media too. I mean, I met some of you all through social media, through either Facebook and Twitter. And I have to say, especially Twitter, I was very resistant to using it for a long time and didn't become truly active on it until like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But there are a lot of very vocal, outspoken, wonderful writers of color on Twitter. And once you start finding them and start following them, I mean, I feel like there's a very strong community on Twitter.
I agree.
Yeah, I had a very mixed experience myself in an MFA program. I don't think that's the only way to go. And especially now, because things are available over Zoom, you know, taking an online class somewhere, you know, it could be for 2 sessions or 4 sessions, but you meet a couple of people that you connect to and keep that going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And residencies when we can again.
Yes, when we can again.
When we can again.
That should be the next anthology, When We Can.
Oh my God.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been such an amazing conversation. I think a really special and unique one, and I'm glad I got to listen. And thank you so much to the attendees who attended. Jenny, Devi, Sejal, Anjali, Sonia, you were all wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
I need a photo.
Oh, right.
I forgot, document. All right.
Screenshot. I'm doing one too.
Hey, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.